Very good evening. Actually, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce Mr. Indrajit Khanna, who has written book Flashes Before My Eyes, The Civil Service and More. And I tell you, I have gone through in last 2 days when this book was given to me, I was glued completely. A very senior, experienced civil service officer so humbly written his experience from school days where Amitabh Bachchan studied with him in Sherwood College in Nainital, to Stephens College, to IAS in 1966, and the journey starts at SDM and the collector, which district was that first one? Jodhpur? Badmer, Jodhpur.
Within 25 days was
Baswada. And then the steps, meaning that the climbing the steps in the career with bigger responsibility, and then going up to as joint secretary and additional secretary in Delhi, Ministry of Finance, working with Mr. Manmohan Singh, who was the finance minister that time, and then coming back as chief secretary of Rajasthan, and till 2003 when he retired. And obviously people like him never retire, so obviously some election commission in Rajasthan he was heading, and then afterwards continuing still is very active. But I must say that for the young people, it is must reading who are really looking into their career, that what public service is, how you really divide your time between the managing the family and the work, and how you're dealing with different pressures. Because in Indian administrative services, which I have seen from very close, that at the age of 22, you have been put in a district, and so much of responsibility and power which is given to you, and in fact it is almost like that you have to manage the complete district with all, meaning it's almost like that you have judiciary power. I would call SDM when we call magistrate power that time at the age of 22. And also amazing that after coming out from Mussoorie, that kind of thing which happens, and then you start growing. So what also I liked is that he was documenting each and everything in his diary, date wise. And that is also we need to learn, that if anything which is happening, note it down, and when you read it, it's so smooth reading with date wise. Mr. Chatterjee, please come. We are just remembering you. So when you're just going through, it is almost in front of your eyes, whatever it says that flashes before my eyes, and I felt that whatever Mr. Indrajit Khanna has written, everything was coming in front of your eyes. The activities were happening, what he has described, we were almost visualizing them. And one thing which Mr. Chatterjee is also here, and I felt very excited about it when it was mentioned about Jawaja project, and he was the person in charge, and Mr. Ravi J. Mathai and NID and TV Rao and all other people were there. So somewhere I told him that we are also part of your journey somewhere when you are managing the Jawaja project, and I am so happy that Mr. Ashok Chatterjee is also here, who was spearheading that time with Mr. Ravi J. Mathai. So I think this is the journey which has gone in, and afterwards, you know, as a chief secretary and as returning from Delhi as a chief secretary, how navigated the whole thing, and also the personal side of it, because when you are a very busy and responsible officer, what all it takes to managing both the sides. And Madam Yasmin, late Madam Yasmin Khanna, and the end chapter is also very, very touchy. I must say that it's very, that how this whole relationship, and after that the pandemic has come. So I'm thinking, actually he will be talking about it, but I thought that I must talk about the flow which this book has was amazing. And I would request all of you, and young people especially, that the challenges which you go through in this public service, and how fulfilling, I would say that it's a very fulfilling career and life with Mr. Khanna has lived and living, and it's just illustrious career and life, I would say. So thank you so much for coming to Ahmedabad and talking about your book, and I'm sure the message which you have given is going to go a long way for young people to inspire to take this career or add value in their lives. So with that, may I request you to please come and talk a little bit about your book. Thank you.
Professor Vyas, Dr. Dixit, Mr. Dinesh Bansal, and friends. It will be a pleasure for me to talk to you all. My challenge for writing this, I had not thought of writing any autobiography. An odd suggestion was made once in a while. I said, this is nothing, because what happens in an autobiography, you are blowing your own trumpet. Okay. So many autobiographies are written. I said, no, I'm not going to write. But that morning on 3rd December 2020, I get up and I look at the WhatsApps which are circulating, and there was one WhatsApp, somebody had sent it, not Amitabh himself, but it was by him, in which in that 3 or 4 minutes he said 3 important things. A, the sacrifice of his parents for the boys, 2 boys there, Amitabh and Ajitabh, number 1. 2, the importance which they gave to educating the 2 boys. And 3rd, the education that he got in our school, which is Sherwood College in Nainital. Now, I said there and then, I said, okay, there is so much of commonality. We both studied in the same school, in the same class. Good or bad, experiences were there. If at all, I thought my father and mother were in circumstances, particularly financial, which were more hard than Amitabh's parents were. And they had 2 children, my parents had 3. There was always that element of sacrifice, no grudging the importance of education for the 3 children. And my parents always said, they were asked me, they came into Delhi in 41, when the Hisar famine, after that they came in, and many people used to ask my father particularly, you are living in a private flat, you don't take a government flat, you could get one flat allotted. He said, I have to retire, I have to take a flat. So his approach to life was totally different. And he said, after retirement, I have 3 houses, my 3 children are my 3 houses, why do I need another house? So that was the type of thinking of the previous generation, and I said that I must acknowledge it. And particularly for whom? Those 2 sitting here, my grandchildren, my sister's grandchildren who happen to have now gone off to America, they wouldn't know. Once they came into Jaipur 10 years ago, they were much younger. And it was a treat for them to see camels on the road and bulls and cows on the road and such things. So, you see, the world is totally different for them. First of all, between America and India, and between them and the grandparents or great-grandparents. So I said I must write, and it was private domain. When after 8 months of writing, I sent it to 3 people, give me your comments, one of whom was Professor T.V. Rao, the other was my batchmate Shailaja, who is Delhi cadre, UT cadre, and the third was my cadre mate C.K. Matthew, who is now with Premji University. Each of the 3 said you must put it into public domain, and that's how now it is before you. Times change. I want to talk about 2 more. Pardon? Acha, memoirs, because I have been reading in the last 1.5 years in memoirs, autobiographies. Mr. Montek Ahluwalia calls his own, I don't know how many of you have come across it, if you haven't, please do, Backstage. backstage. Montague, I'm sure all of you have heard about. He was my boss as finance secretary. Look at the sacrifice his father made. He acknowledges in the book. His father was in the subordinate defense account service, posted in Delhi. Now, Delhi was a place in those times where Montague and the other children could get a little better education as compared to if his father were in a cantonment in a remote area where education facilities may not be that good. So his father was being promoted All India Defence Account Service, which was a big thing, from a subordinate account service to the defence account. He decided to forego his promotion to the All India service so that Montague and the other children could continue to be educated in England, where the educational opportunities were better. Montague therefore went to Delhi Public School to start with, and then to St. Stephen's College and on to Oxford and so on. Another sacrifice, Amitabh, I have already told you, is another author which I suggest many of you may try to read. It's called, the book is titled, 3 words, Code Name God. Code Name God by Mani Bhaumik. He is a big scientist and a entrepreneur in America, must be about 80 plus now. He was in penury in Bengal, the Bengalis. The time of the Bengal famine, early 80s. Ashok Chatterjee may not have been there at that time, but would remember or heard of the Bengal famine. Now, this boy in a village was living with his mother and grandmother. Father was involved too much in Gandhiji's freedom struggle, so he had to leave the village and run away most nights and days. They had nothing to eat. Small rations would come. And he was probably more close to the grandmother for some reason. She was giving her little diet to this boy so that he is able to live, and ultimately he acknowledges that she died, the grandmother died of starvation. So these are the types of sacrifices. When you go back in time, you will find somewhere down the line in many of your families there have been, which you must acknowledge. What happens is, in our life, we live on a day-to-day basis and we tend to forget or gloss over these type of things. So there is a reflection. If you do, you will come across many of these incidents. Many, they say the only constant is change. But change takes place all the time. A particular change in my perception. When I was going to get married, my wife to be had just finished her B.Ed, and obviously the intention of having finished B.Ed, she was extremely good athlete, Rajasthan #1 and so on and so forth, but she was intending to teach. But I told her, look, I know I have joined, it's about 4 years service, but if you work, then we will hardly have any family life, because my transfer can be in days, months. If it's a year or two, I'll be lucky. And how can we move around? Naturally, you would like to continue to work. So, please don't work. Unfair. Some of the girls here may say you are very unkind to her. I don't know. But she agreed. And she never worked. She took up other things. Gardening, reading, many other things. Fully occupied. Never grudged. But when the time came for our daughter, both of us said, you must be a professional. You must earn your own bread and butter, be competent, then you decide on getting married, having children and other things. So perceptions change with time. I myself changed. For my wife, I said one thing. For my daughter, I changed 30 years down the line or 20 years down the line and said, you adopt a different approach to life. Maybe circumstances had made me change, I don't know. Maybe my first decision was bad or unfair. Now, 2 key words which I want to repeat here. Civil and service. That's what the book is. 40 years of my life have been spent. Service, very easy to explain with the Hindi translation, seva. It's all about seva. Clear? I don't need to go further. Civil is the other word, which I want to emphasize with an example. And once I emphasize what is not civil, you will probably understand what therefore should be civil in your behavior, in your attitude to problems and situations. There is a chief secretary, I don't name anybody always. And he has called, the director has asked him of a department to come and discuss certain matters. The director goes and the director takes the deputy director, who is a lady, with him. So this is real. It's not hearsay, it's real. When they both enter, naturally they are walking into the room, so the chief secretary signals to the director, chair, sit down. So the deputy director moves towards the other chair, the chief secretary does this. So she is little, starts fumbling for words. So the director then comes to her rescue and says, sir, she is with me, she is my deputy director. Now, then he sort of, and she has told me, I even checked on this again with her before citing this incident. She said he was not happy, but since it had become a little awkward situation for him, the director was saying, I have brought her here. So then he sort of grudgingly said, you sit down. Now, was that civil action on his part? He is the top civil servant. If that is his approach to subordinates, what would be his approach to the people whom he is serving? I wonder. So, the two things, you have to be civil in everything that you do. I know it's difficult. We face very difficult circumstances. We get impatient. I keep telling my grandchildren, one of my biggest faults is I am impatient. Because you are impatient, sometimes you tend to get a little angry. But that passes over. I think people whom you work with over time realize that that anger or whatever was short-lived. It was not long-lasting and you don't hold things against people. One of the most important things for anybody, whether it is a politician, whether it is a civil servant, or wherever you work, are values. Okay? Now, how do values come? It's all a part of your upbringing. And where does your upbringing start? First, it is the family. Whatever your surrounding family members, be they your elder brothers or sisters, most certainly they will be your parents, grandparents. I never had the good fortune of seeing any of my 4 grandparents. That's why I tell my grandchildren. They have had the good fortune of seeing all 4 grandparents. In fact, in the case of the granddaughter, she saw the great-grandfather also. She never remembers, but the photographs are there to remind her that she saw 4 generations of the family. These are, pleasures which you treasure as you go on in life. So these begin with the family, the friends. It's all about the company that you keep. The teachers in school and college, and I was sharing that, it's a appendix in my book. In college, I was a student of mathematics. I must have asked one of the professors, Ranjit Bhatia, very bright himself because he was a Rhodes Scholar, and he had represented, on top of being a Rhodes Scholar, he had represented India at the Rome Olympics. Not a small thing. He didn't get a medal, but he represented in the 800 meters. So, this was Ranjit Bhatia. I must have asked him a question in class and I forgot as a student. It must have been going around in his mind. Indrajit asked me something, I have not got the solution. He is now sitting in Jabalpur, maybe 2 months later, 3 months later. I've got that postcard, that's how I can say this so authoritatively to you. He writes that postcard, photocopy is there. The principal asked me, since he was called, he said, sir, please give me. I said, just now I cherish it too much. Maybe they will give it, I don't know. But he wrote that postcard, Dear Satish, another professor. Indrajit asked me a question in class, here is the solution. All the formulas, I just showed it to you. Now, these are the type of teachers that we come across. And these are the type, they need not say it, but their actions speak louder than their words. Professor Chatterjee will, I think, agree with me wholeheartedly. He may even forget the student, but the student will not forget him. It's the peers and the friends. As I said, Amitabh is a personality, but he doesn't forget friends. When we met after 50, not for me, I had been meeting him more frequently, but we had a get together in school in 2008 after 50 years. They have Golden Jubilee and all that. And when he came, there were 16 of us. Everyone, some of them he had not met for 50 years. And he is a superstar. He remembered everyone by name. Now, it's a difficult, of course, we live our lives together for 9 months at a time. But still, he had not forgotten superstar or whatever, but he remembered each one's name and the nickname also, the pet name also, as in my case. So your character is a reflection of the company you keep. As I said, in my parents' case, probably they thought that the company, Gulli Danda and all that on the streets and the pavements of Daryaganj in Delhi would be maybe harmful for me, and so they decided to send me to school. They were fortunate enough to get that scholarship, and that was the story. Now, when I talk to my friends, and which I have acknowledged in the book, you may say we are old-fashioned, you may say all old people seem to have that tendency that the next generation lacks something in their character, which may not be up to the mark which that generation has. But the perception is that there is a fall in standards. Now, I have tried to say why. And I have divided that period of time of 70 years into 4 periods. In our time, when we were growing up, school, college, initial years in service, there was a euphoria of independence. We may not have been part of the independence struggle. We may have been born, but too small. But it came to us as a carryover. I remember going to Pandit Nehru's funeral, standing on Rajpath. It was something that I was in college at that time that took you out. So it was, it had come to your head. That was one. Then the challenge of 3 wars, not something that we want just to get the national character back. 62 war, 65 war, 71 war, all came quickly. I'm glad that after 61 we have not had a war, but that put a certain fervor in us, which did not allow the national character to fall. 3 periods now thereafter. The emergency, unfortunate, and the period up to 89. That was the first period where a little bit of a downfall took place. In the political context, then came the era of coalitions. Sometimes we say a coalition government is unstable. Now there is a feeling, there are people who write, that a majority government sometimes creates problems for the people, because they feel that whatever they are doing is right, irrespective of what others may think. It's a difficult situation. And then we have the third period of political stability today, 2014 to now. But we are not sure. There are many decisions which have been taken. For example, farmers' agitation was reversed. Demonetization, whether it was right or wrong, I don't know how many of you faced. As an individual, I faced a lot of hardship to get my own money back. So, these are decisions which were taken. On the face of it, looked like it was on the spur of the moment, not carefully thought of, caused a lot of hardship to people. But that was a government which says it meant business. Then the common thing, less of government and more of governance. Now, between government and governance, what is the difference? I am not a theorist. I am a practical person. My definitions may not coincide with what Professor Vyas and Professor Chatterjee may say, but to me, government is that machinery which should enable things to happen. And governance is the process by which government acts. Okay? So at some stages I am part of the government, and at some stages I am part of the system of governance. And governance to me is more important than the government. Obviously, governance must be participatory. There must be decentralization. I had a formal launch of my book at my college on Monday, 4 days ago, and Manishankar Iyer had come. He is an old student of the college. He was with me, senior to me in college, but later when we were drafting the constitutional amendment for Panchayati Raj, which later came to be known as the 73rd and 74th Amendment, both of us used to sit as joint secretaries. He came from Mr. Rajiv Gandhi's office and I was in the Ministry of Rural Development, because my secretary, Vinod Pandey, Rural Development, was coordinating that effort. So all of us used to sit together and do our work. Those were the inputs from the Prime Minister, which Manishankar brought, and we put together the thing. Now, this was a revolutionary change, it has been, to take democracy down to the grassroots level. Gandhiji talked about Panchayati Raj. It is part of the constitution, not in a fundamental right manner, but in a directive principle manner. Now, since 1993 as the 73rd and 74th Amendment, this process of democratic decentralization, not complete, it will never be complete, but we have to work more and more to make it as effective as possible. And three things are involved: the functions are involved, the functionaries are involved, and the finances are involved. So we are weakest on finances today in terms of the transfer of powers at the district, block and panchayat level. The local politician, that is the MLA and MP, is very weary of sharing his power with the local level. That is the crux of the matter. A Zilla Pramukh or Zilla Panchayat President, as you call him in Gujarat, may be more powerful than the MLA. But the MLA sits in Gandhinagar, or in my case in Jaipur, and he is closer to those decision-making bodies which deal with the whole state. Similarly, the Member of Parliament looks at national issues, though many times his perception of national problems emanates from his understanding of his own little constituency, which is little. Does he understand a UP MP Tamil Nadu? Does he understand Bengal? Does he understand Kerala, Gujarat? In fact, I had the good fortune, civil servants were like that. My secretary in rural development once told a cabinet minister in a cabinet subcommittee meeting, "Madam, you don't understand this country. You only know your constituency. I will tell you what this country." These were the type of civil servants we had. I don't know whether many of them will be able to speak like this. It was taken well. Of course, he was known for his idiosyncrasies and his mannerisms. So, when we talk of governance, there has to be accountability, there has to be a predictability of what you do, transparency in what you do, a free flow of information, and a strong civil society. You must have counterbalance. Government has to be a facilitator, not so much a doer. Sometimes government, oversteps and wants to do for, enable people to do. Even I am more for people rather than industrialists, not industry, but industrialists. So enable people to do. There used to be a lot of talk, because I worked in rural development, so I had a feel for it, of how do you deal with the poor. And my feeling used to always be, enable them, encourage them, upgrade their skills, but hold their hand. Don't give it up. It's not a one-shot affair. When you deal with a poor person, maybe 5 years you have to hold his hand. Professor Vyas has dealt, Professor Chatterjee has dealt with the Jwaja people. You see, you can't back off. They may keep coming to you. Even today, the Jwaja people keep coming. You have to extend your helping hand, but the more and more they stand on their own feet, the happier and happier you are. So never get a feeling that the poor can do without your help. And of course, at the end of the day, in my case, when I say this government is of two worlds, this country is of two worlds, the poor and the rich, where lies my choice as a civil servant? In my thinking, where is my choice? I am very clear. My choice is that 70% of all right, 40%, 50%, whatever you want to say, of the poor. The rich can take care of themselves. And if I can contribute in a little way towards that element, I think I am a happier person. Now, when we come to the civil service as such, the most important point is recruitment. Where do you start? As they say, you give a monkey nuts, तो बंदर ही मिलेगा. Okay. So training is the most important, and all of you are a part of training institutions. But to have good training, you must have the best of trainers. Again, same thing. If the trainers are not good, how on earth are you going to train people who are the best? So no matter whether it's a teacher in a school, teacher in a college, teacher in a fine institution like Ahmedabad or any other, or IITs, we have to have the best teachers. Then there is the question of selection and how they select. Obviously, UPSC by God's grace is still, I think, reasonably good. State public service commissions, I am afraid, are not. What we hear, biased sometimes, caste conscious other times, this country has no place, unfortunately, for such people. That's my view. Impersonal, but I take my own experience and I've shared it here. The performance evaluation throughout your service is an extremely important thing. It happens in even educational institutions like, how am I evaluated? When I take my own case, I say, when I appeared before the UPSC, half an hour, 4 experts, no doubt, but evaluated me and gave me 40%, brought my rank down. By God's grace, I had done reasonably well in my written paper, so I still qualified. 40%. I was disappointed. Am I an average person? When I went to the academy and the director at the end of 1 year makes an assessment, and that becomes part of our total marks. It's added to the UPSC marks, so it's very important in your rank amongst the same 120. I got the second highest marks, and I have argued, where is performance evaluation? That half an hour that I got, or that 1 year that I got, which is correct? Always it will happen in your career. You will be unhappy sometimes. So that performance evaluation system has to be well cultured. I have discussed what happens in IIMA. I won't go into that here. Very sound system. Very sound. I hope it continues today. I don't know. Tomorrow I'll go there and find out something. Then there is this, I must share another one. When I left my training after 2 years and went for my first posting, 2 pieces of advice my collector gave me. I was how much? 23, 24, 25. He told me 2 things. He was a promoting officer, collector of Kota. He said, 2 things remember. Because you are young, you are going to hold office very quickly. Don't rush into new things. The tendency is, many officers come, table north, south, east, west kar do, ye kar do, wo kar do. He says, just take it easy. Try to understand your people, understand the system. Jobs are of different variety. So don't rush into making changes. Number 1. And number 2, don't criticize your predecessor. Now, you may say this is ordinary advice, but it must have hit something in my head that now 50, 60 years after my retirement, I still remember my character who gave me this advice. So, these are type of things, small pieces, but they should remain with you and you note them. There's this other point that I have is generalist versus specialist. A very frequent argument. Is a generalist like me good or necessary in the country? Should we do away with generalists altogether? Should we bring in only specialists? As I said, I don't have answers for many things. I just went this morning to Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel's statue, big one. And I am reminded about his discussions in the Constituent Assembly where, and subsequently, where if at all the civil service exists in this country in the form it is today, it is because of him and his arguments which kept the civil service alive. He said they are your colleagues. They have a fair amount of experience. Please value that experience. Hear him out. Decisions are yours, but hear him out. So, I have reasoned that in a 35-year lifespan of a civil servant, now again, as I said, this is my personal view. People may or may not agree. Ideally, I can divide it into 3 periods. The first 10 years, of which 2 are clear training and 8, when you are a young officer, are work, but also learning. So you are learning as you go along, quickly moving up the ladder, but you are learning. And you should be learning hard. You are moving to different, in my case, SDO, collector, deputy secretary, director education, all came within 8 years. So government also has to also see that you are enabled to encompass this in a 8 to 10 year time frame. The next 10 years, again the government should help you. And you should also be thinking, where do you want to specialize? 2, 3 fields, not more. At least 2, maybe 3. In my case, I know. It was not that I consciously did it. It happened. Education, rural development and finance. The last 15 years, which is the major portion, is where you give back to the government and to the people in terms of policy making. So this is how I divide the period of life of a civil servant. I know it's not ideal. Your postings, as I said, my own one posting was 25 days, 6 months, but there were also long postings. So go along. It won't work out in this way ideally, but at least if government keeps a focus in mind, if they feel inclined, as I am saying, then I think things would be a little better than they are. I will mention an incident of Professor Ravi Mathai because he is close to my heart and he is close to Ahmedabad. About performance appraisal, I am coming back to that. We had a small group which was the rural development group, and we used to visit. We were comparing tribal administration in 3 adjacent states: Rajasthan, Banswara district, Gujarat, Panchmahal, and Madhya Pradesh, Jhabua. So every 3 months or so, 6 of us, professors, Ravi, TV, Uday Parikh, Anil Gupta, Shroff, Manu Shroff, and myself would take Ravi's van and go out for 3-4 days into these districts. On one such visit to Jhabua, after spending 3 days, the last day, the collector, we wanted to wind up discussions and we had a discussion with him. So it was 6 in the evening, he called us at home, had an hour's discussion and we left. Driving back in Ravi's Matador, we pick up, you see, this is the beauty of Ahmedabad. You pick up a subject and then you threadbare try to discuss it out. So we discussed the subject of performance evaluation and we said, collector. Okay? So we each evaluated. So at the end of that short period, Ravi asked me, what is your evaluation of the collector? So in one word I said, very good. Immediately he picked up this point. He said, you have been a little unkind to him. Wasn't he outstanding? And I'll tell you why. This is the perceptive mind. He said, why did you downgrade him from outstanding to very good? Because you saw the government vehicle come in, because we were sitting in the lawn, you couldn't help it. Lady got down, presumably the wife. Children got down, presumably the children. And obviously they had gone somewhere. This was a government vehicle, Jeep or Matador or whatever. And it struck you that this was not the best thing that they could have done. To use that government vehicle, obviously to go out. He said, but if the collector is giving, he's a 24-hour working official. Government doesn't bother if at 12 o'clock at night there is a law and order problem or a flood or something like that. He's woken up and told you get to the spot and tell us what is to be done. So shouldn't the government be magnanimous to permit him the use? And therefore you as a superior, shouldn't you have a broader mind? My feeling. But Ravi's perceptive mind made me think that am I sometimes too harsh in my judgment of others? At the same time, how do I balance with that thing that you must not only be honest, very difficult, but you must appear to be honest, something that was told to us repeatedly when we were in the Missouri Academy. As I said, many of these things I have no answers to. You have to set your own path. Reward system, people sometimes feel, and the common expression I know, Bhairu Singh ji used to tell me quite often, he was my chief minister, very good chief minister. गधे और घोड़े सरकार में एक बराबर है. I hope you understand that. ठीक है? A donkey and a horse, stallion, are more or less the same in this country. Donkey will also in the civil service reach the highest post, and a horse, a stallion, will also reach. The unfortunate part in government. Now, what is the answer to that? It frightens me if I say that like you have in the private sector, I know my son-in-law has arrived. They have PLI system, performance linked evaluation. Incentive, PLI, yes. Now, if we start doing that in government where we deal with millions and millions of employees, teachers, 2.5 lakhs in my time as director teachers. Okay, I know they are good teachers. We give them national awards, we give them state awards, but hardly anything in terms of money. And money does make the mayor go to some extent. Again, I have no answer. But what I feel is, you get your rewards. The smallest things, and I'll give you 1 or 2 examples to tell you, which are done by your bosses in their own way, but which you never forget. Now, one day I told my boss, I was a SDM, I told collector, I said, sir, I want 2 days leave, I have to go to Jaipur from Ajmer. My parents have come from Delhi, I want to show them around. अच्छा, जाना है? अच्छा, ये काम ले जाओ, सेक्रेटेरिएट में कर लेना, गाड़ी ले जाओ. Now, isn't that my reward? I could have gone by bus, taken some local transport, taken my parents. Now, it's all forgotten. You may say the boss was misusing the vehicle. No, but he did give me a task to do, and I did spend some time in the secretariat trying to resolve that matter. As a more senior officer, if my secretary wrote on my note, which remained for posterity on the file, this is an excellent note, my minister would see that. My subordinate, the clerk, when the file goes up and the file goes down, he will also see. Secretary साहब तो joint secretary के लिए लिख रहे हैं excellent note. 1 बार नहीं, 3 बार, 4 बार. So he has put it on record. That is the confidence that you get, that is your good evaluation. At the end of the year, he will give you obviously something called a annual performance appraisal. But these are the good things. I don't know whether monetarily government with the large number of employees that it has can ever have a monetary incentive built into the system which the private sector has. 2 things and I'll close. One, political interference, you must be wanting to hear about it, and the other is, how was my state of Rajasthan? I was not, I'm born and brought up in Delhi. I have settled in Rajasthan. That should reveal to you that I am fond of the state. But before I do that, I'll talk about the political. It is inevitable in a democracy. You can't say that politicians, it's a question of what word you want to use. You see, he wants to do something for his elector. Sometimes he will also transgress the line and favor a view that is beyond the rules and regulations. That is where you have to draw the line. Otherwise, if he comes to you with 4 people and says, this chap has not got his pension, this has this problem, you are bound to hear him. Sometimes he may say a wrong thing, then you are bound to say no. And there are politicians of all hues. As I said, to me, the 2 most prominent politicians I have worked with, and I have no hesitation in sharing in my book and here, are a BJP person and a Congress person. Bhairu Singh Shekhawat, and I worked with him as Chief Minister when he was Chief Minister twice. one of the finest politicians. Never hard on you, never angry, always protective of the civil service. He knew officers in and out, and he knew how to take care of them also. He was not nasty, but he knew how to take care of those who were probably not up to the mark. And Dr. Manmohan Singh, the other extreme. Too good a person maybe sometimes to be in politics, but very fine people. And I have tried to say that the three finance ministers that I worked with, I have given a paragraph on that. How would I define them? I have not named them, but in St. Stephen's College, my batchmate Shalaja named them. I have not named. 2 out of the 3 always called me Inderjeet. 1 of the 3 always called me Mr. Khanna. Now for me, I was, how much? Joint Secretary, so about 20 years service, 24 years service. In which environment do I wish to work? Where my boss is more endearing as far as I am concerned, or someone who is a little stiff, far removed? I think I will be energized to work better if my boss is more endearing. Okay? If he is more officious, मतलब मज़ा नहीं आता. Then Rajasthan, my last point. A wonderful state to work in. I was talking to about 240 probationers about 10 days ago who are in the state provincial service, who are undergoing a foundation course at our State Institute of Public Administration on the book. And I said, thank the Lord above that you are in Rajasthan. It's one of the best states, administrative, relatively best. It may not be something compared to countries abroad, within the country. Because you are going to work, if you have chosen the civil service, you will work within this country. To work in this country. The stories we hear stories from our own batchmates across the country. Sometimes vertically, sometimes horizontally. And we have been very fortunate. You have had your ups and downs with ministers and other things, but you have always had a protector. Within the political network, within the civil service network, somewhere down the line or up the line, you will have somebody who will side with you when you are advising or taking a decision accordingly. And there is a Lord always to protect you in what you are doing. This is my thesis in the whole matter. So you will have interference, live with it, no problem. But not much of a problem. I was transferred in 25 days. Now my wife could have told me, what the hell are we doing? Is this the thing that I was married into, that अभी पैक करके हम अजमेर से बाड़मेर पहुँचे? हमारे लिए तो सब एक ही है, बाड़मेर भी एक ही है, बांसवाड़ा भी एक है, क्यों हमको गवर्नमेंट वहाँ भेज रही है? She could have grudged. I don't remember her ever telling me. She packed the bags quietly and came and went off to Banswara. So, and the last is, how many of you are in blood group wise B positive? The large majority is B is positive. So, therefore, civil servants also, in terms of their mind and framework, always be positive. That would be my advice for whatever is worth. 2-penny advice. Thank you.
Very nice. Very Thank you so much. I think you know that your 40 years of experience, it is not easy to discuss it in 1 hour. We need to have longer sessions, but I think there is a lot of take which today's presentation, the value-centric governance, what matters in your career, what path we need to take, how to take a right decision. I think a lot of things we have to learn from this book and the experience from Mr. Indrajit Khanna's lecture which he gave. Very insightful, I must say, very insightful. And because the person, you see, the person who has gone through this whole experience from young officer to 40 years of career, lot of insights are there. It's not just a bookish knowledge, but it is more experiential thing which is coming out. And I'm sure this book is going to give a lot of insight to young people, and major message which I take, that we have to really make value-centric society, and values are above everything, which we have to bring it in our character. So thank you so much. I think it's really honor to sit with you, and from Ahmedabad. Management Association. Person of-